Happy Friday. You made it. Congratulations. The end of the work week. It is Mile High Sports Today. I'm your host, Sean Drotar. With me today, we got the memo of earth tones, apparently. We're just going. This friend Adila Piro, host of the SCO Show, of course, of Mile High Sports as well. Big game on tap for the Buffaloes this weekend. We'll talk more about that as we go along. So, obviously, an important week for the Denver Broncos, trying to get back to 2-2 with the game against the Jets. This week, of course, Anilo, the Chiefs and the Chargers play, one would presume, especially given Derwin James' suspension and Justin Herbert's injury situation, that the Chargers are obviously behind the 8 ball there. They could drop to 2-2. The Broncos could kind of scramble back because even though the AFC is loaded, there's not a lot of teams off to a really great start. There's a lot of teams where the Broncos are. I don't believe the Broncos are more than a 6-win team still, even the way they played against Tampa Bay. But I'll tell you what, I would love to be wrong. And the Broncos have invested a lot of money and a lot of effort in making sure that this East Coast swing for them is effective. They spent the entire week at the famed Greenbrier Resort, a resort that's been around since the 1780s and hosted every president up till Eisenhower, essentially, at one point out in West Virginia. But it was not a small thing. It took the Broncos over $2 million on the trip to stay there, to get everything set up. They brought 5 tons of equipment, extra tons of equipment on this trip. They brought staff to make all the meals, all these sort of things. But the Broncos were very satisfied with the way it all worked out. Is that investment going to be worth it? Not entirely sure. But I suppose when you've been down for as long as the Broncos have, the idea of doing something different on a road trip, it's not hockey, it's not baseball, it's not one of those where you're going to be playing, every other day for a week and a half on the East Coast, to basically not come back to Denver and then go back to New York, but stay in West Virginia. Kind of an interesting approach. What did you make about just the idea that they would be staying away? Maybe not so weird because the Broncos are about to undergo a situation over the next couple of years where they are rebuilding their own headquarters. And so maybe the idea of seeing how a trip away works might be valuable.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. And first and foremost, an absolute pleasure to be on here with you guys. Mile High Sports Today, Sean Drotar, our guy Danny Bailey behind the scenes as well.
Indeed.
But I'm going to steal Troy Renck's take, if I may, because I'm Troy Renck.
Well, be very careful because he's going to be on in like 20 minutes.
Well, why don't I tease it then?
Okay, that's a better way of putting it.
And here's what I'll say as well is if you want to go check out the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck, it's on the Mile High Sports YouTube channel. He asked me to wake up at 6:30 in the morning today to go produce it. And I was like, are you serious, Troy?
Well, that sounds like a thing that you two got to work out.
Yeah, no, it's okay. But he was telling me because the travel schedule for media is insane. But point being, if you check out the podcast, you hear from Quinn Miners and you hear from Jonathan Franklin Myers as well. And they have some really, really good insight in regards to how they feel about this dynamic. But long story short, if the Broncos are able to go on into New York and beat the Jets, you best believe that it's a success. You best believe that they'll consider doing it again next year. And I didn't understand the depth of how much Sean Payton is in love with this place.
Yeah.
And a lot of the guys were talking about how, it's kind of like a college football environment. It almost reminded me of I watched Remember the Titans on my flight home. And, when they do the training camp, they're kind of just like out in the woods doing the up downs and all that kind of stuff. So I think it could be some good communal bonding for the team, a young team that's still kind of searching for their identity. And at the end of the day, when it comes to the dollar figure, Sean, that is pocket change. That is the equivalent of $20 for me and you.
It might be less than that. Remember, the Broncos ownership, the wealthiest in the NFL, the wealthiest in all of sports. So maybe not that important on the grand scheme of things. It's more about how it pays out for them in the game. Bo Nix said that playing against Aaron Rodgers is surreal. Rodgers off to a good, if not great start. The Jets themselves a little bit up and down, but Rodgers, especially last week, looked tremendous. We talked about it a little bit yesterday with Nate Lundy. He was a little surprised that Rodgers has looked as good in the early going as he was. I am less so because I figured if he wasn't getting pressured, I know the mobility's down, age alone, let alone the Achilles injury, was going to knock that down. But I'm not shocked. I think this is a guy that he knows all the tricks. If he has the time in the pocket, he's still going to carve you up. And the Broncos, I think one of the challenges they have, we'll talk a little bit about the defense in a couple minutes. One of the challenges they have is making sure that you keep pressure on Rodgers, but don't over pressure, because Aaron Rodgers has made a career in chewing teams up with play action and especially in avoiding the initial pressure, stepping up in the pocket and delivering very dangerous strikes. And I think he's still capable of doing that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I, for one, am not surprised. I think that Aaron Rodgers, I mean, I've always said this. He is the most awe-inspiring quarterback that I've ever seen with my own two eyes. I know he has the one championship, so people want to bring him down for that. But yeah, he's 40 years old, right? So he's definitely on the other side of his prime. But his mental IQ, his football IQ is still very much intact. This is a guy that if the Broncos are going to want to win this game, he's not going to turn the ball over, very safe with the football. And he's got some real weapons there with Breece Hall in the backfield, Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard, we saw last week on Thursday Night Football, really kind of burst onto the scene. So I'm expecting a very sound game plan from the New York Jets to try to attack this Denver Broncos defense. And I think it's also worth noting, as exciting as the game was last week for the win against Tampa Bay, they were without Vita Vea. They were without a couple of other key players.
Vita Vea especially, I think, a really important part of it when you look at the Broncos running game and the ability, because that guy is a game wrecker in the middle. He's not Chris Jones, but when you get into the next tier of guys in the middle that can wreck your game, Vea is one of them. And it is important. I'm not discounting the Broncos win because not everyone gets injuries. You have to deal with them. But let's not pretend that wasn't a big one for Tampa.
No, it was huge. And at the end of the day, you got to play who's on your schedule. And you can the Broncos have no impact, or, they have nothing to do with Vita Vea not playing. But at the end of the day, I do think they, a little bit of a luck there to not have to go up against him, against that Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, excuse me. And at the end of the day, Hassan Reddick still not playing for the Jets. What a weird situation that is.
Isn't that strange? But it's costing him a lot of money.
Yeah, too. I was reading it this morning. He might need to get a new agent because that's bad.
Yeah, that seems like a questionable decision. I agree with you on that one.
Yeah, and so, and the other thing, I know you guys talked about it likely a ton yesterday, no Alex Singleton, who, is kind of the heartbeat of this Denver Broncos defense. Like, look, we all love Pat Surtain, but Pat Surtain shades one side of the field. I look at Alex Singleton as like that general in the middle of the field, the guy who gets the guys together in the huddle and dishes out the play and kind of sets the tone for the team on defense with physicality. So at the end of the day, I'm very curious to see how the Broncos respond without one of their team leaders and going up against one of, if not the best quarterbacks of all time, in Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, and that part to me is really fascinating because this Jets team, obviously people thought that they were going to be a lot better last year before the injury. You're dealing with the fourth consecutive, an odd part for Bo Nix too, the fourth consecutive head coach that it started as a defensive coordinator before being a head coach. So Bo Nix, and Troy Renck talked about that before the season started, was going to be the first quarterback in a long time to have his first 4 games playing against teams coached by guys that were defensive coordinators. That in and of itself is also pretty fascinating. So when we look at this matchup, it's a big game, depending on what you think the Broncos' chances are. Now, the Broncos lose Alex Singleton. That's a big loss. We talked about it yesterday. Cody Barton expected to step up, at least in the interim. Barton's already played in more than 50% of the snaps, and he's a veteran, so I don't think you worry about it. Is there a drop-off? Sure, because if he was better than Singleton, presumably he'd be starting. But I don't think, given that position, in which we've seen a lot of guys on a lot of teams rack up tackles, not discounting Singleton, whose career play has continued to go up. And I'm not looking at the tackle numbers. We knew he was good at tackling. I was looking at his ability to tackle more at the line of scrimmage, to generate pressure here and there. All of those things were getting better for Singleton. So it is a major loss. But I think the Broncos can withstand it with Barton, and they had signed Quan Alexander to the practice squad. But maybe this week away, when you suffer a big injury like that, allows that team bonding and the ability to circle the wagons. Actually, this could have been a little advantageous timing because it's never advantageous to lose a guy like Singleton. But if you have to lose a guy like Singleton, maybe it's best when you're already kind of clumped together there. You kind of get together and realize, okay, well, this is just us against the world. Maybe that's a good mentality, because for the Broncos, 1-3 and 2-2 really change the way your future of your season looks. This is a bigger game when you're talking about at least future playoff odds, and I'm not bullish on those, but the Broncos need to be. And if you're 2-2, you can say, hey, we're in this. If you're 1-3, it's a harder argument.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I talked about how the Broncos lack a little bit of an identity. How many guys on that roster have played in the playoffs? Like, I mean, I can't really think of, oh my gosh. Like, I don't know if I can think of one off the top of my head. Sutton, no.
Not a lot.
Like, none of Bulls. Like, literally, who the heck has played in the playoffs?
Well, if you've been on the Broncos,
Ben Powers,
like nobody on the Denver Broncos has played on the playoffs as a Bronco.
Exactly.
Nobody.
And that's where it's like, if that's the case, that's where I kind of like the idea of going out to West Virginia and doing some of that team bonding, as I mentioned, looking for that identity. But I don't want to say that the Broncos have to play desperate on Sunday, but they need to take the game to the Jets, right? The Jets, probably feel a little comfortable with Aaron Rodgers in the pocket. They've got a good defense. To your point, Robert Saleh's a bright defensive mind. Denver needs to go out and attack the Jets, much like Bo Nix did against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That first drive, 4 for 4 for 70 yards, perfect, set the tone, up 7-0. Obviously, that's going to be hard to replicate, and it depends on if you get the ball or not. But at the end of the day, I just think that they need to bring the game to New York, because if they just let Aaron Rodgers sit back, green 19, crosser route, corner route, he's going to pick this defense apart. And, I'm excited for it, because the other thing that I want to talk about, we could talk about it throughout the course of the program, Jets have to go to London next week.
Right.
And I wonder if maybe there's a little
you could be looking past
ahead
them a little bit. Obviously, that does kind of affect teams going forward. But we will talk about taking the game to New York. The Broncos took the game to Tampa, and they did so defensively. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you hear me talk about the Denver Athletic Club and all the cool things it does. But see, Anilo Pirro is one of those members of the member-owned club, so who better to tell you about it than a guy that's part of it?
I love the place, man. The Denver Athletic Club is the place to be. It's not just an athletic club. It's a lifestyle club, man. I can work out of there. They've got the coffee bar with the hot coffee, the tea, cream, sugar. You can have lunch there. They've got the pub with a full restaurant menu, a billiards hall, sauna, steam room, bowling alley, basketball courts, cold plunge, lap pool. What am I missing? I don't know. Whatever you want in regards to a lifestyle club or an athletic club, they're going to have you covered over at the DAC, conveniently located downtown. So if you're going to a Nuggets game or a Rockies game or an Avalanche game or a Broncos game, it's a great place to stop by before, get a quick sweat, get a good meal, and be on your way. I cannot recommend the Denver Athletic Club enough. It's been about a half a year that I've been a member there, and it's honestly the best decision that I've made in my adult life, and I'm not even kidding you. It is the place to be. Great place to kind of decompress, unwind, and also great for networking, man. You can have business meetings there. I know, Sean, you and I have gone to, I believe, an event there as well, or maybe it was Mohrmann, but the whole MHS crew was there. It is a club for your whole life. It truly is. Incredible gym, incredible facility. If you're looking to up your game, be sure to check out our friends over at the DAC, because it is a decision that you will not regret.
What an up every game, because as you pointed out, you could, you could go to the golf simulator, then hit the bar, then go bowl a game, then cold plunge, then go have dinner.
All while you're inside. So it's about to get cold out.
That's absolutely bonkers.
It's a no-brainer, man. And you can meet some incredible people there. Like, I was in the sauna the other day, and I met this guy who had just moved here from Arkansas, and he was asking me for recommendations about what to do in Denver, and we were just kind of chopping it up. Got his Instagram, right? Now we're chatting every now and again. I met someone that worked at City Hall the other day, and he was telling me about his time and how he's traveled the world and his stories. I mean, the people that go there as well, it's just an incredible community, so I cannot recommend it enough.
Well, for the Broncos, one of the reasons that things are going so well is the defense, and the numbers for the Broncos defense are extraordinarily impressive in the early going. And a lot of this, look, players win games. Okay. I've gone over this a million times. Coaches are great, but you can Bill Belichick, Don Shula, Bill Walsh, Tom Landry, go crazy. But none of those guys stepped on the field as a coach and won a football game. But coaches do make a difference when they put their players in the best opportunity to succeed. And over the last couple of seasons, given what he's had to work with, especially, I could not be more impressed with what Vance Joseph has done as a defensive coordinator. To the point where I look at Vance Joseph and say, is this guy maybe 10, 15 years from now, we're going to say he's one of the very best defensive coordinators in the NFL? It's not impossible. I talked about this earlier this week. The idea when he came back to the Broncos after Ejiro Evero did a nice job with the defense, with, I would say, a defense that probably had more established talent than this one does. The first thing he did was adopt Ejiro Evero's nomenclature, because most of the plays, obviously in the NFL, pull behind the curtain, most of NFL playbooks about 90% the same. There's a few tweaks here and there, about 10% of it, but they run all the same basic plays. Vance Joseph, instead of teaching people his nomenclature for the same plays, just incorporated Evero's. He just used it, figuring it's easier for me to learn it than to make all my other guys learn it, the guys that are coming back.
Right.
That shows a remarkable self-awareness and lack of ego. That even doesn't include the fact that he came back to the team that fired him as the head coach.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself is pretty unique and pretty special. And talked about the idea of how the defense evolves. He says straight up, if you're going to be in this league for a long time as a coordinator, you have to evolve. I hate saying I'm a 3-4 guy or a 4-3 guy. I'm a defensive coordinator. And what we saw against Tampa, I think, showed that. Early pressure against Baker Mayfield. Mayfield, who for the last year and a half has actually been one of the best quarterbacks in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And then the pressure worked, and he changed on the fly and brought more pressure, changed it play by play, quarter by quarter. One of the things that I think Broncos fans have been dying to see Sean Payton do offensively instead of see Tyler Beatty go out there. Sorry, Tyler. Bidet. We're going to get that. Go out there, and then Peyton after the game said, oh, well, we would have played it more. We had packages, but they never came up. Well, you're the coach. You can call whatever plays you want whenever you want. Joseph is being more adept and advantageous, I think, in play-by-play, down by down, altering what he's doing. And how about these for the numbers? The Broncos defense, 259.3 yards per game allowed, third in the league. Pass yards per game only allowing 133.3. They're not going to be able to hold Aaron Rodgers to that, but okay. But that is
you could try.
The pressure rate of 44.8% is third, 14 sacks. One of the big questions we had about the Broncos was the idea is, could they do what a lot of teams try to do, can't pull off, pressure by committee, right? You don't have TJ Watt. You don't have Nick Bosa. You don't have Chris Jones. You don't have Micah Parsons. You don't have those guys. So the Broncos thought between Jonathan Cooper and Nick Bonito and Jonah Ellis and Franklin Myers and Zach Allen, they would be able to generate pressure from a lot of different angles. Well, they did that. 13 guys had pressure against Baker Mayfield. 13. You start 11. That's remarkable. And they have generated 14 sacks in the 3 games. That is tied for second in the league. And keep in mind, too, Mayfield may not be all that mobile, but Geno Smith is more mobile than people give him credit for. And certainly Justin Fields is mobile. They've sat 14 sacks. Now, it's because they've been bringing a lot of blitzes. 56.9% is tops in the league. You can't blitz Rodgers at that rate. But what we're seeing is not Vance Joseph's defense just going crazy against every quarterback. We've seen him be judicious. The pressure rate against Mayfield higher than it was against Fields. The pressure against Smith a little lower than it was against Fields. It's ramped up, but he's adjusting play by play. And this stat, I think, is the most jarring. Completions of 20 or more yards allowed. The Broncos defense have allowed 1.
Wow.
The best in the league by far. What Joseph's done with this defense, I think, especially when you look across it and go, the defense seems pretty good. It hasn't been pretty good, especially given the fact in the first 2 games, the offense was doing nothing. It's been great.
And I know that if the Broncos want to make the playoffs, which we all think is a long shot right here, that's exactly the recipe, is let your offense not have to put the weight of the world on their shoulders and be able to lean on your defense. Exactly. And, you know, they've got some playmakers, man. Obviously, Patrick Surtain has solidified himself as one of the best players in the NFL, specifically at the cornerback position. And, you know, Baker Mayfield looked rattled in that game, which is so, I mean, Geno Smith was rattled in the first half.
And then you saw Joseph dial up as soon as he looked rattled. Bring more.
Exactly.
Bring more heat. I mean, keep it coming.
Justin Fields threw for 120 yards in that game against the Steelers. So, you know,
that's a game the Broncos easily look back. And if you're on the defensive side of the ball, you're like, we absolutely should have won that. That's on the offense, not on the defense. Exactly.
And so, you know, they got to keep playing that way. You know, I think Mike Evans was limited 2 receptions for 17 yards in that game against Tampa.
When that was with, when the funny thing is Chris Godwin, who had been their top receiver statistically, that was Riley Moss's job for the most part. And Moss did another very good job of holding him down. There's a lot of receiving talent in Tampa Bay. When you talk about Otten at tight end, you look at Godwin, you look at Evans, you look at McMillan, their rookie receiver, Jalen McMillan, and Rachaad White catches out of the backfield an awful lot, as much as anyone not named, say, Saquon Barkley. And the Broncos are able to stifle them. Now, the Jets are a different animal. You talked a little bit about their receiving talent, and Baker Mayfield, even though he's played well, is not going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. No. Aaron Rodgers is.
Without a doubt. And I don't care if how old was John Elway when he won those Super Bowls? 38, 39?
Yeah, he was
up there,
35, 36. Yeah,
you know, so I mean, obviously, the back end of his career, and I know there's a big difference.
It's a big difference. And Elway, by the time, had more damage to his knees. Remember, he played his entire career without an ACL.
I don't even understand how that's possible, to be honest with you, but you're right.
Yeah, so
that seems impossible.
The way we do training and nourishment and everything, quarterbacks play longer than they've ever played before.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, and Aaron Rodgers is not like a Lamar Jackson type or a Michael Vick type that was reliant on his legs. Like, all he's doing is dropping back to pass, scanning the field, and finding the open man. So it's like, I understand that, yes, he is up there in age, but it's not like he's being asked to lower the shoulder and make hits or, dive for first downs. So at the end of the day, like, is he the same Aaron Rodgers as we saw 4 or 5 years ago? Probably not. But is he in the same vein? Absolutely. And so, they're going to have to, I remember I could hear my dad's voice in the back of my head. My dad was never a Tom Brady guy. He always thought, a little overrated.
Me too.
That's changed a little bit.
I like your dad already.
But, at the end of the day, the thing is, the one constant,
good job, Mr. Pirro.
The one constant that every single quarterback struggles with is pressure,
especially pressure directly up the middle.
Exactly. And I don't care if you're Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. If you can put pressure on the quarterback, you are going to force these guys into uncomfortable situations. And that is the one common denominator over the entire history of football that can help lead you to success and disrupt another team's offensive game plan, which is what they're going to have to do it, Sean.
Yeah, they will. This is a tough game for them to win, but at the same time, I'm not sure it's not winnable. Now, they have to play the best game of their season by far. There's no question about that. But when you do look at the possibility of it, yeah, I mean, I think that there's a window. Now, I say this with a little bit of rosy cheeks here because I have picked the Broncos to win 2 games this season, both of which they lost. I have picked the Broncos to lose by double digits this season. That one they won. So maybe I don't have a good gauge on this team
yet.
So
pick them to lose again.
Right, I will.
Yes.
I will, because maybe I've got the reverse jinx going, and I will do my part to help here. But I just don't see this game necessarily with the Broncos nearly a touchdown underdog. I don't know if that's the case. Denver's defense has shown me something. If they can run the ball just a little, I think there's an opportunity here.
Yeah, no, and at the end of the day, I'm very curious to see who gets the first touch out of the backfield. Is it going to be Tyler Bidet, which I think it should be? He's the only running back that has shown
promoted to the
anything.
53. I think that's happening.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I love Javonte Williams as much as anybody else, but bad.
It's not happening.
The returns have not been good. Jaleel McLaughlin scored the touchdown against Tampa, but that was really it for him. Just inefficient running. And at the end of the day, if Tyler Bidet is going to give you the best chance to compete in these games at the running back position, I think you have to go for it. So I'm interested because that was my big thing in the first few weeks even last week. You saw them make at least a concerted effort to establish the run. And I think that really helps open things up for Bo Nix on top of simplifying the play call.
Yes, that's an awful lot of it. It is part of that. You have to for the offensive side, you have to find a way. The Broncos right now are okay. We'll give you this. We'll give you the old. We'll go with the old coaching adage, right? First you lose big, then you lose small, then you win small, then you win big.
Right.
The Broncos have been losing small. Both of their losses, 1-score games. They won big in that one game, but that's not who they are yet. This is one of those games. If you're going to win it, you're going to have to win it small. The over-under in this game is 39.5 for an NFL total. That is low.
Extremely
The truth
low.
of the matter is the closer they get to that, the better that is for the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, because
I mean, if the Broncos win this game, it's going to be a 2017, 19-17 sort of affair. It's not going to be a shootout. If the Jets get over 20 points in this game, they're probably winning.
Yeah, I think it's a safe bet to make just because we have not seen the Broncos offense look very explosive. And as great as that first drive was against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think Bo Nix was something like 20 of 35 or something like that from that moment on, so he kind of settled back into what we've seen from the first 2 games rather at that point. So, I think the other thing is playing from ahead. If you can put the pressure on the Jets, as we've talked about, bring the game to New York and force Aaron Rodgers to be down 7-0 and have to go down and march the field, maybe you can hold him to a field goal. It's 7-3. Maybe you come back, kick a field goal, or score another touchdown. If the Broncos want to try to steal this game and upset the Jets, I don't think they can be playing behind from much of a deficit. I think 7, maybe 10 points at the most is the only type of deficit I could see the Broncos coming back from at this point.
Deficit is absolutely not what you want at this point. If you're the Broncos, playing from behind is not a recipe for success. They have to find a way to get out early, and maybe that is going with Tyler Bidet, going with the maybe a little bit of play action. What we saw, some creativity. But one of the things while we will prepare for our friend Troy Renck to join us from the Denver Post, the idea here is that for the Broncos here, it is an interesting spot, and we will we're talking. We'll give you this real quickly, but anyway, the idea that Marvin Mims, was going to be part of the offense. I talked about this in training camp, and I got a little flack for it. And I'm 0 for 3 on picking the Broncos this season, but I got this one right. Marvin Mims Jr. is not really part of the Broncos offense. And here's the thing. He's not going to be. And you know why he's not going to be? Because if he wasn't last year as a rookie, we talk about Sean Payton guys. That's a Sean Payton guy. But we also look at Sean Payton's receiver types. What are they? 6'2", 6'3", 6'4"?
Yep.
Big body types? Yep. Okay. Broncos have a lot of those. Marvin Mims isn't one of them. Marvin Mims, however, is the first draft pick that Sean Payton basically made. Okay. Nevertheless, that's not what we're seeing. He's not part of it, because if he was going to be part of it last year with Jerry Jeudy underperforming, with no real third option, with no tight ends, Marvin Mims still didn't get into more than about 1 out of every 5 plays. This year, it's even lower. So if Sean Payton wanted Marvin Mims in the games, he'd be in the games. Troy Franklin, who was inactive in the first week, got more snaps than Marvin Mims against Tampa Bay. Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how to make it more clear. Marvin Mims was an all-pro at return. Pro Bowler return, that's what he does. He's the best at it. The NFL touchback rule, I think it hasn't worked this year because the NFL wasn't bold enough. The touchback needed to go to the 35 to more incentivize teams to kick it to the returners and gamble on a return. That's what a lot of teams wanted. They weren't brave enough to do that. I bet you they will do that next year. That'll be the adjustment, is the touchback will go to the 35, incentivizing teams to kick into that return box and let
it is so bad.
Well, everyone's just decided we're not going to gamble on it. Just start at the 25 and go, which is also what the options the NFL discussed. But that's what Marvin Mims is on this team for. He's not even out there, folks, as a decoy. He's out there for fewer than 10 snaps a game. Marvin Mims is not part of this offense. So all those of you, the fantasy fans, are going like, when are they going to unleash Marvin Mims? Let me explain this to you. They won't. Because there has been no time like the present. It's been that way for a season and now almost a quarter of a season. And at any point, Sean Payton could have done it. Marvin Mims snaps going down the pecking order of receivers is going down, not up. That's not how it's going to work. Is he going to be out there occasionally as a decoy? Sure. Is he going to get like a target a game? Sure. But he is not a guy that's going to be out here to be a major part of this offense. So need to move on from that. So that, if you realize that the Marvin Mims deep shots is not going to be part of what Sean Payton calls, you understand that this offense is not going to be a big play explosive offense. It's even more incumbent on the defense to keep these games close. This is the way. Let's go to college basketball a little bit as a metaphor, right? Okay. You know that when you have like Duke play, I don't know, say Bonaventure, right?
Shout out Woj.
Yeah. And somehow those guys hang with it. The Bonnies end up hanging, right? They'll lose, but they lose by like 6 instead of getting their doors blown off, right? How does that happen? Because some of these teams go with the old Princeton offense. They play out the clock. They keep it late. They keep it close. They muck up the game to make sure that maybe Duke, instead of getting its 82 points it's averaging, it's going to have to win with like 68.
That's what the Giants tried to do yesterday.
Yeah, it didn't work for them. But for the Denver Broncos, that is their recipe for success. That's how it's going to have to work. And so, we will do that and see how that works out. But then again, that brings it back to Vance Joseph. The Broncos defense, you can Sean Payton this all day long, but Vance Joseph for the Denver Broncos defense is going to be the deciding factor of whether this team has a winning or losing record at the end of the year. It's the best unit on the team. It's been the most important unit on the team, and how they will react without Alex Singleton will define it a lot. We will have an opportunity to talk to Troy Renck hopefully later. We will not. Okay, we won't, getting up from a producer, Luck Stanley Bailey, because Troy was out in West Virginia.
Yeah, he's got a wacky travel schedule today.
And guess what was going out there? Hurricane out there. The rains are coming in, so signal everything's a mess. We won't be able to get Troy today, so we will move on. We'll have Dan Mohrmann in a little bit talking about Colorado preps and the prep games of the week. But let's move to something that, Nilo would know a little bit about. The Colorado Buffaloes taking on UCF the Knights in a game in which, I get it. The Buffs were 4-8. I get that a lot of people don't believe yet, and maybe they even shouldn't. But I rarely say this, but a 14-point underdog with Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, the disrespect. What is going on? I mean, I get it. That's a good program, but UCF is a 2-touchdown favorite over the Buffs.
And UCF hasn't really played anybody yet.
No.
That's the thing.
And they're a running team.
That was the big indicator for me. And let me see if I can give you some credit here. I'm curious if the line has moved at all, because you told me.
I just checked it. It's
so it's at 14
over
and a half.
DraftKings. Yep.
It was at 15.5 earlier in the week. And I remember on Wednesday, you and I were
to have jumped on that. I missed it. But
after Chase and I did the SCO show, you were like, you know what? I'm going to lock that in right now, so I can get the 2 touchdowns.
By the time I finished the show and tried to go, it went back to 2 touchdowns.
Yeah. 14.5 though, and 15.5 isn't.
No, as long as it's more than 2 touchdowns.
Exactly. That's the key number when betting the NFL. So I'll come right out and say it. Call me a homer. Tell me I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I don't care. I'm on the Buffs plus 14.5 for everything that Drotar said. I think UCF hasn't played anybody great. I think UCF has. We know that UCF has one of the best running games in college football, but running games means running clock. Usually doesn't mean big points and big bunches. And at the end of the day, I think this Colorado defense is much improved. Robert Livingston has done a great job of making adjustments in the second half. Sometimes the first half of these games are a little wishy-washy.
Yeah. Boy, that's a nice way of putting it.
The adjustments have been phenomenal from Coach Livingston. And the cherry on top, what you just said, Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, we saw it last week against Baylor. 2 touchdowns is a lot. If there's anyone I want the ball with their hand in that moment, it's Shedeur Sanders. I think they can keep this game close. Yeah,
and the thing that I find interesting about it is, okay, you have a running team, you have the running clock. I get all that, and that's certainly important, and it's a big part of this matchup. I'm talking about how the Broncos need to keep it, down and keep this game low scoring and stuff like that. That's what UCF would probably like to do. At the same time, okay, you dominate the clock, you dominate the time of possession, but they're a team that's much better at quick strike offenses. Put it this way, giving the ball to the Buffs and saying, okay, you have a limited amount of time to score. You have a limited amount of time to push the ball down the field. That's what this Buffs offense is literally built to do.
Yep.
With Shedeur Sanders, with Hunter, with Jimmy Horn Jr., with LeJounte Wester, with Shepard. This is what the Buffs are built to do, is quick strike. Look at the way they caught up and then surpassed Baylor, a game which they could have lost and maybe even should have lost. Baylor certainly thinks so, but you couldn't hold these guys down. This is such an explosive offense in chunks. Are they a good running team? They are not. But the last couple of games,
they don't want to
but they are starting to move in that direction a little bit. Moving to Michael Welch changes the way things have gone. We'll find out about Dallin Hayden's status there. I think the Buffs have maybe gotten away from maybe the emotional story of Charlie Offerdahl being their starter. Nice to see the former walk-on get the scholarship and then be the starter, but he has been ineffective. He's not great at blitz pickup. Welch, even though a smaller guy, was better at it. And if there's anything the Buffs need, it's blitz pickup. Shedeur Sanders cannot take 8 sacks in this game and expect to win like he did against Baylor.
Yeah, and what is Baylor in regards to the Big 12, right? Probably closer to the bottom, much like they are, much like CU.
They're 3-9 in their last 12 games under head coach Dave Aranda, who actually I think is doing a good job turning Baylor around. But let's not pretend that there was a world beater there. Baylor's not Nebraska; they aren't even close to Nebraska. So it's that's the funny part. I look at this matchup and you look about the Buffs and the Knights, and they're like, I don't know how much we know about these teams, but I do know that the Knights were down 28-7 to TCU.
Yep.
Now they managed to come back too, so credit to them. But both of these teams have a lot of question marks still 3 games in.
Yeah, and that's where
3
I
for
think
the Knights, 4 for the Buffs.
Like I just think that UCF's a little bit of an unknown. And you know what? I was talking about this on the SCO show with Chase Howell. You guys can check that out on the Mile High Sports YouTube channel. I think part of the reason why the line is the way that it is how bad Colorado looked on the road against Nebraska.
They didn't look ready.
And I know it's Nebraska and all that kind of stuff, right? Rivalry game, but they looked awful. That's as bad as I think I've seen them.
That game was over at the end of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably in the first quarter. It was done.
Yeah, it was over and done with.
As soon as Shedeur Sanders threw one of the worst picks you will see all year in, as one of my friends texted me immediately after saying that, you will see in the NCAA, the NFL, or you're playing with your friends on Madden. It's as bad a pick as you'll see all year. That game was done. And the Buffs were cooked. They didn't look ready. That cannot happen in this game because we do know that the UCF could score.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why the line is the way that it is. But you hope that, I think Coach Prime was the one who said, he's like, I don't take losses, they're lessons. And you hope that and I know it's, figuratively speaking, Coach Prime talk. But seriously, I think that's what you hope is that you remember that Nebraska game. You remember how bad you got ransacked in that matchup, and you feel a lot better about yourself going into this matchup against UCF. And another aspect of this that I think Colorado can use to have a chip on their shoulder a little bit is They've got, I think we said on the SCO show, like almost 20 kids from Florida.
It's 17 players on his roster from Florida. Jimmy Horn actually went to nearby Sanford Seminole High School.
Yep.
Transferred from South Florida, but is from that area.
And so, a little bit of a homecoming for these guys. They kind of want to show out and, show why they went to Colorado, why the Buffs are who they are. And so I think
watch that stadium be about half because of the traction the Buffs have got nationally. I think that stadium is going to be 50-50. Now, both teams are black and gold, so maybe you can't tell the difference. but I think there's going to be a heavy Colorado fan base present in this game.
Yeah, which I think bodes well for them as well. And we'll have to see, but there's no question about the talent with Colorado. The one thing that you've got to keep an eye on is that offensive line. To your point, you can't let Shedeur Sanders be on his back 8 times. He's fantastic at improv, probably the best quarterback at that in college football right now. But you need to keep him upright because when he has time to survey the field and scan in the pocket, he's as good as anybody right now in the sport.
Yep. Now, the bright side is UCF has a grand total of 1 sack this year. 1.
Sheesh.
In 3 games. So
love that.
The aggressiveness in the blitz has not been there. And they're going to have to do something that they don't do. They're going to have to be more aggressive to come after Shedeur Sanders, which is the Buffs' weakness, is that offensive line and the running game. Those are their main weaknesses. The defensive line quite a bit better, but they have not run into this. Army last night after, if you listen to Nate Lundy, by the way, talking about his betting segment to point out that Temple's really bad at football, that the Army Black Knights decimated those guys last night. Army is averaging 371.3 yards on the ground. That is a ridiculous number. It is 60 yards a game more than third place Boise State.
Jeez.
Yet it is still second place in FBS to UCF, which is averaging 375.7. The Buffs defensive line looks much better, and it has gotten better week to week, probably more clearly than any other unit on the team. But they haven't seen anything like this.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And
6.8 yards per.
Yeah,
by the way,
that's a recipe for disaster. Whoa. You need to trim that in half. Essentially, you need to get that down to 3.2, 3.5,
even
somewhere
that
down
is
there.
Still.
Exactly. So, but that's how the Buffs are going to have a chance to win this game is their defense, much like the Broncos, as we just talked about. They're going to have to set the tone in this matchup because we know that Shedeur Sanders can drop back to pass and find the open receiver. We know he's got an embarrassment of riches at the wideout position between Travis Hunter, LaJohntay Wester, Omarion Miller, who burst on the scene last week, Jimmy Horn Jr., who you talked about as well.
I feel bad. I always leave out a receiver. Forgot about Omarion Miller. I was trying to get Shepard and Wester and Horn and Hunter, and you're right. Exactly. Goodness.
Yeah, and so at the end of the day, I think it starts and ends with the Colorado defensive line, but also Colorado's linebacking core that I think is going to be huge in clogging up some of those holes.
Yes, they're really going to have to go. And for the Buffs, who, because of the nature of their roster, are maybe a little bit better in man-to-man pass coverage. That's kind of what they do. They do best. They are going to have to probably stack the box, do some things they don't have to do. On the bright side, especially with someone like Travis Hunter, you can let him go on an island and not worry too much about it and go from there. So that will end up being part of the equation.
You're right about that.
But RJ Harvey, by the way, for UCF, 149 rushing yards per game. Just himself. And in the comeback win over TCU, remember, you think about negative game scripts, right? Down 28-7 to TCU. Got to have to pass the ball. No. Harvey had 180 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. So you're talking about a guy that's top 10 in the nation. Even when the Knights are down, they do not get away from their identity. They run, and they run again, but they can find a way to pass a little bit. The way to get ahead of that game where they won it, KJ Jefferson hit Kobe Hudson with only 20 seconds to go with a 20-yard touchdown pass. And of course, the Buffs had to get a Hail Mary to get to their end zone, to get that into overtime, to find a way to win that game at home against Folsom. I would have to say, I don't think the Knights should be a 2-touchdown favorite.
Yeah, it seems a little steep.
But I do think they should be the favorite because on top of that, one of the big drawbacks for the Buffs that we haven't talked about is following the hurricane coming through.
Yeah.
Orlando did not take being inland, of course, does not generally take the worst of the hurricanes, and it certainly didn't in this one. But it did get a whole bunch of rain. That field could be soggy, squishy, a mess. That will slow down the Buffs' passing game, and it might give an advantage to the teams that can run a little bit better. That's clearly UCF. The Buffs have their work cut out for them, but could they win? I think that covering this, to my mind, I will be disappointed if in fact, I'll be immensely disappointed if the Buffs lose to UCF by more than 2 touchdowns. But if they lose by a single score, that wouldn't shock me. I think they're underdogs for a reason.
Yeah, no, for sure. And again, as I mentioned, I think they haven't really shown an ability to prove it on the road. And I know that last year's team is a lot different than this year's team. But they sputtered down the stretch there. What was it?
4-8.
Yeah. They had a good win against Arizona State, I want to say, on the road last year, but really outside of that, the returns.
Now, 6 of their losses were single digits, worth noting in
right.
that too. I think that got lost in the shuffle with the Buffs record.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think to your point, though.
When they finished with that 1-7 finish.
Yeah. If it's going to be a wishy-washy type of playing field, that's obviously going to benefit UCF. But I think maybe it also forces the hand of Colorado to try to establish their run game, something that I've been harping on.
Yes. Maybe it'll force them into doing it. Maybe it will, especially if you get down Hayden back, transfer out of Ohio State. Maybe you can go with a little Hayden and Welch. You can go with a little power running game, set Shedeur Sanders up for some play action. That's a recipe for success, not only in this game, but long-term for the Buffs as the season goes along. If you want to catch the game and you want to go say hi to Anilo Piro or find out what Danny Bailey looks like, tall drink of water over there on the other side of the camera. They will be down at number 38 for the Buffs watch party that we do every single Buffs game, home and road, down in Rhino. It is a show, and it might be the best place in Denver to watch sports, period.
It's elite, man. I've had a great time at every single watch party. We're doing a pregame show. We're doing a postgame show. We're doing giveaways throughout the game, end of the first quarter, halftime, third quarter, fourth quarter. They have a DJ on site as well that makes it so we don't have to listen to any commercials, which I absolutely love.
That's awesome.
Number 38 has turned into one of my favorite places to watch sports, but especially my favorite place to watch the Colorado Buffaloes. I know it'll be yours too. Fantastic drink specials, fantastic food specials. I'm dreaming about getting me a burger tomorrow, maybe a slice of pizza. My gosh. It is a phenomenal place.
Burgers there, so
very good. And remember, I'm going to see you there. Let's go. I'm going to see you at 38.
That's kind of a pun. Look at you. Yeah. But that will be fun. The food is terrific. There's Colorado flavor and everything. All the Colorado breweries, all the Colorado spirits, you name it. It's an outstanding place. We've also done that for Avs and Nuggets. So if you've been out for any of those, you can imagine what it's going to be like tomorrow afternoon for the Buffs. And if you enjoyed after the game, we'll stick around. There's a little college football afterwards, little Georgia, Bama.
Oh, yeah, just a small game.
Small game, doesn't have any impact on anything in case you like watching some of the best teams in the country. And make sure you check it all weekend. It really is terrific. Go to number 38. It's a website, nmbr38.com. You probably can't do it for tomorrow, but maybe when you want to, you can also reserve tables when you think about just getting a reservation. No. It's more like you're going to a game or a concert. You can pick out the table you want and reserve that. And keep in mind the huge literal jumbotron outside on the patio. The weekend is supposed to be phenomenal. Don't miss it. The SCO show with the Nilo. That's basically an extension of the SCO show when you guys do the pre and post. So get a little bit about what that's about. Easy to get to. Look, I live down south, and when I'm coming up to that area, I'm like, oh man, I have to navigate through. No, not here. You just go 70 to Washington, and it's 90 seconds off the exit. Just bang, you're right there. So come check it out for the game tomorrow. Get there early for a good seat. Besides, you want to have a drink or two and get yourself a little one of those burgers so you don't do it while you're catching the game. So come on down and check that out. Well, it is a football Friday here. And one of the things that we like to do at Mile High Sports is talk about all of the football. And we'll have an opportunity to talk with Dan Mohrmann to talk a little bit about the Colorado prep scene. But want to remind you that if you are a self-employed person, you've heard me talk about SEL Mortgage. That's because if you're self-employed, it is really difficult to find a way to get a home loan, to refinance a home. All these things are really challenging when you're self-employed. Well, this is what SCL Mortgage does. They've helped thousands of self-employed people refinance their mortgage or buy a house with just their bank statement loan, no tax returns needed. SCL understands the challenges of being self-employed. So you can find them at myspecialmortgage.com or give them a call at 303-790-2222. That's 303-790-2222. SCL's been serving Colorado successfully for 23 years. So call them today or visit them at myspecialmortgage.com. If you're self-employed, this is where you need to go. You got to give them a call and see what they can do for you. NMLS number 1200716. Well, we'll have an opportunity, as we said, to talk about all of the things that we're doing here over at Mile High Sports, including the opportunity to talk about prep. So we'll take a look at some of those as well as soon as we get an opportunity to check in with Dan Mohrmann, who is joining us right here. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at the wrong screen there. That's on me on a Friday. Dan, thanks for joining us. Rebranded, of course, Colorado Preps. Check out the coloradopreps.com website and get the app driven by Ford, an opportunity to check out everything, especially on these Fridays when we have the live scoreboard giving you updates all across the state. Dan, where do you want to start?
I mean, we can start with probably the big one in 3A, and don't worry about not seeing me on the screen right away, Sean. Half the time, I don't know where I am on a Friday, so. Um, but we're in a little bit of the northern Denver area as we go to Roosevelt this weekend, where the Rough Riders are going to take on Windsor, who dropped down to 3A this year. This is a huge test for Roosevelt, who has that #1 ranking. Next to their name in the Colorado Preps polls. I've chatted with their head coach, Lane Wassinger, in bits and pieces. And he says this team still needs to pass a big test. They passed one a couple weeks ago. I noticed Danilo ducked out of there, so he didn't have to hear about Roosevelt taking down Holy Family.
Oh,
But
I can let him know when he comes back.
Yeah, I mean, just remind him that the #1 team in the state just knocked off his guys. But
well, I mean, it was #1, No
but
shame.
yeah, it's this is going to be a huge test. I mean, you have two teams who really like to run the ball, and Trip Thomas is the kid for Windsor, who's probably going to have a great game in order for them to come away with this win. So Luke Vigil, he's the guy at Roosevelt. He's been massive, running for about 127 yards per game for them. So that's a huge one. It's going to be a fun, kind of an old school smash mouth football game.
And one of the things that's really cool of what you do, everything over at Colorado Preps, is the idea that you're covering all of it. A lot of people look at it and they think, well, sure, you can get, you can talk about 5A, and you can talk about Valor, and you can talk about Cherry Creek, and you can talk about all those big schools. But there are a lot of other games on the docket, and as you pointed out, you're talking about Roosevelt there. I mean, there are bigger ones, but the thing that really impresses me is how you're able to make sure that you keep every single level covered as well as you do. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and it's a challenge for us, but it's something that I've loved doing this for years, and it's half the fun. A lot of it, Sean, where you really grow a passion for it is when you're able to go to those small towns and see those small level football games. It's easy to go to, Valor or any game that's being played at Echo Park Stadium in Parker or anywhere in Highlands Ranch and find top level football. The atmosphere, for my money, the best place you're going to go are places like Lyman, La Junta. I've been to games in Basalt, and the atmosphere there, the entire town shows up. It's kind of that nostalgia of what high school football is supposed to be, and it kind of shifts it a little bit more away from that, maybe low level college type atmosphere. And those communities care. When Highlands Ranch has how many schools kind of bunch right in there, the community's not coming out in rally of one school. So that's where that passion to track all levels comes from.
Well, what's next on the docket for the big games coming up this weekend?
Well, if we're gonna look at 5A, because you do have to look at 5A, there's a big one between Valor Christian and Ralston Valley. The Mustangs got a 22-21 win in this game last year, and that was one of the more exciting games in all of 5A last season. So this rematch should be fun. The trick with this is a lot of our voters in the Colorado Preps rankings have Valor Christian sitting at #4 in the polls. People I talk to think they're the second best team in the state behind Cherry Creek, which is, right where these two teams have been for the last several years. So I think this game's really going to show how much validity there is to that. If Valor can come out and just jump ahead of Ralston Valley and really find separation on the scoreboard quickly, then that's going to be a hard argument to make. It's tough to knock down someone like Columbine, who's your defending 5A champion and hasn't lost a game, and they have their own battle with Heritage tonight. But this is going to be a huge test for sure. Bob Stitt, the Valor offensive coordinator, he's got quarterback Dawson Olk playing really good football. He's throwing for 215 yards a game. Doesn't sound like a big number, but when you're looking at high school games and when scores get out of hand and people start throttling back, it's significant.
Well, there is a lot of football going on with Pueblo this Friday, obviously, and there's obviously always a lot going on in Pueblo, but you have a couple to highlight there.
Yeah, so Pueblo West, who kind of the same way I just talked about in 5A, there are I'd say 4 teams kind of sitting in that upper tier of 4A football, and that's Palmer Ridge, Montrose, um, Pueblo West, and Broomfield. And Pueblo West is kind of the one that maybe might seem like an outlier to start, but that's a good football team. Their head coach, Clint Buderis, he was a Florence guy growing up. He won a couple of state championships at La Junta before moving over to coach the Cyclones. And they have a quarterback that can do it all. Gavin Lockett is probably one of the most electrifying players to play that position in the state because he can throw the ball, but man, does that guy like to take off and run. He's thrown for about 462 yards this year, and he's also rushed for over 400 yards. So he's as dual threat can be. They have a tough one against Vista Ridge. The Wolves' only loss came at the hands of Columbine, who's the number 3 team in 5A. And Doug Ottewell was at that game, and he was sending me texts all night saying, I really like Vista Ridge's quarterback. And yeah, that's a kid named Zayden Stevens. He was a Pueblo kid to start. He started at Pueblo East, and then his family moved up to the Colorado Springs area. So if I have time tonight, I'm going to be running around to a couple of different games. If I can get over there, that's one I'm really curious to see. And then if we stick to Pueblo, you have to look at the Bell game, which in terms of Colorado high school football history is maybe the most significant game every year. It's the longest running high school football rivalry west of the Mississippi River. I even took a Nilo down there about 2 years ago to check out the atmosphere. And I mean, Dutch Clark Stadium is filled to the brim with over 10,000 people to watch this game. It doesn't matter how the two teams are playing. It doesn't matter what's going on with either program. This is the game that you show up for. A buddy of mine played college basketball in Pueblo, and all he knew is on Friday night of the Bell game, your job was to go to Dutch Clark Stadium. Central's won 5 in a row, but they may be without running back Amari Brown. He did not play last week, and Central lost their first game of the year. So we'll have to wait and see what that status is. Centennials lost 15 straight games, and boy, if they ended that losing streak by getting that Bell back, they will almost literally paint the town red.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about the Bell game and the history of that.
It's just, I mean, it's 2 Pueblo City schools. It's just a long-standing rivalry. The traveling trophy is this old railroad bell. I mean, that thing is on wheels. It probably weighs, north of 100 pounds. And when you win it, if it changes hands, then the winning school will take it back. They'll sand it down and they'll paint it their school color. Central, of course, the Wildcats are blue. Centennial's red. That bell it's only been polished up the last few years with Central hanging on to it. I know the Bulldogs would love to paint that thing red. I've been at that game when the bell has changed hands. There may be no bigger sense of pride in high school football than when a team reclaims the bell from the other side.
So last one for you, Dan, when people go download the Colorado Preps app, which you absolutely should do, driven by Ford, and goes and checks out that scoreboard tonight to stay on top of everything that's going on. Obviously, you can flip all over the place, but if you were focused on, let's say you don't really have a dog in the race and you want to find out just what's going on best, what class do you think has the most drama going on right now?
That's always tough for me to say, Sean. I kind of I naturally tend to gravitate towards a 4A just because I think there's so much parity in that classification right now. You have 2 top 10 matchups in 4A alone. So you have Mesa Ridge taking on Palmer Ridge. We're going to find out a little bit more about Mesa Ridge. Their quarterback, Bryce Reel, heck of a basketball player, has helped the Grizzlies win 2 straight 5A basketball titles. And then, of course, you have that Pueblo West Vista Ridge game that I was talking about. You also have Grand Junction, and I can almost feel Cody Rourke doing a backflip as I mentioned the Tigers. Their quarterback, Will Applegate, has just been phenomenal this year. I had the high school sports guy in Grand Junction, James Berkey, texting me last week saying, man, I don't know if they're all the way back, but this team might be for real. And their quarterback is a legitimate dude. So I'm always watching what's going on with the Tigers. You've got a solid Jeffco team in Dakota Ridge. There's just so much talent up and down the board in 4A. 5A, there's kind of that top level. You've got Cherry Creek, you've got Columbine, you've got Mountain Vista. their quarterback Austin Majeski. I always have to remember how to say it because that spelling is beyond out of this world.
You just needed to know another Majeski when you were younger, like I did.
Right. And unless you do, then you just don't know.
Right.
And then you've got some good matchups with 2A. I mean, University's kind of crept up there to that top 3. They take on Rifle, who's moved up to 3A. The team that I'm going to check out tonight, because they're in my neighborhood, they're actually taking on my high school alma mater over in Manitou Springs. But I really want to see what Forge Christian is about. I've talked about them the last couple weeks. Lineman coach Mike O'Dwyer told me that they are the real deal. So I want to see what Forge has, because I think when we get to that late November period, it could be maybe a Forge Lyman or a Forge Ray or potentially a Forge Centauri state title game. Those are your 4 teams that are in it. So I'm going to go see what that 1A powerhouse team looks like.
Obviously, it's always fun to talk to you every Friday about these, Dan. And, Mile High Sports, this is what we do, live and local. Your Manitou Springs High Schools. We talked about Anilo's, Holy Family. You mentioned Cody Rourke out at Grand Junction. I went to
Ponderosa with a big win last night. 48-7 over Chaparral.
There we go. A school that didn't exist at all when I was at Ponderosa, because now I'm old, but we'll take whatever we can get. But obviously live and local here, this is what we do. Make sure you download that Colorado Preps app, because though the scoreboard stays live, you have an opportunity to get it updated in your real time. Nobody does that. If you want high school sports covered in a way that nobody else does it, coloradopreps.com and the free Colorado Preps app driven by Ford are the places to go. Dan Mohrmann is the guy that runs every single bit of it. We couldn't do it without him. It's always a treat to get to talk to you, my friend. Thanks so much.
Sean, we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thanks so much. Always good to talk to Dan about all of that stuff. And it is fun because, like I said, we got local products here, left and right. There's an investment in that. So the opportunity to talk about prep sports with Dan Mohrmann is terrific. The other thing we like to do a little bit, I know you do and I do, and when he's here, Nate Lundy does, and Danny Bay a little bit, like to dabble a little bit into the sports betting world. Have options for you, by the way. All you do is go to Mile High Sports or grab the Mile High Sports app, and you can look at Colorado sports betting, select that. We have a ton of different options for you to jump into the world of sports betting, because whether it's bonus bets, second chance bets, free ones, any of those sort of things, when you jump in, it's hard to dissect all of those offers and figure out how that all works. So we try to make it easy for you, put it all in one place. We're agnostic. We're just gonna get all of those books, put them up there, give them the best offers, because not everybody wants the same thing. So you look the way you want to get into sports betting, pick a different book that makes an offer for you, jump in. So milehighsports.com, Colorado Sports Betting, we give you all the codes so you can jump in the way you'd like, because everyone has different styles. And by the way, if you are thinking about it, don't be afraid to go to multiple books. Book shopping, as Nate Lundy will tell you, is not only a lot of fun, but it's also a smart way to go. That extra half point you can get here and there. Let's say we're talking Buff Central Florida, that half a point, whether it's 14 or 14 and a half, that can really protect you and make a big difference. And if you have a couple books, I'm not going to lie, I have 6 on my phone, Danilo. You probably do too. You can check them all out and make sure that you're getting the best deal. So go to milehighsports.com, Colorado Sports Betting, select it, and you'll get all of the codes so you can jump in tonight and this weekend, because there is a lot of fun football on tap. We'll talk about the Buffs. We'll talk about the Broncos as well. But you were looking at it. We were talking a bit about the some of these options earlier today. We chatted, and you wanted to pick out a couple over here at the let's go to NFL Saints and Falcons.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting matchup.
It is.
I personally am down on the Saints, and
don't buy that hot start.
No, I've never bought it. I mean, I lost a stupid amount of money.
Clint Kubiak, Derek Carr pairing. You're not sold?
No, I am not sold whatsoever. And you know why I actually was interested in this game is because I was on Atlanta plus 3.5 on Monday night against Kansas City, which ultimately, in my opinion, was still the right side. I know it didn't cash or didn't lose, but an egregious PI call,
terrible call missed. Oh my goodness.
I mean, it's just
so
ridiculous.
Bad.
And at the end of the day, here's the thing. If Atlanta covers that number, Atlanta's a minus 3.5 point favorite. Right. So the fact that I'm getting Atlanta minus 2.5 right now against a Saints team that I'm a little bit wishy-washy against, a division opponent. I mean, look at the Saints offense last week. I mean, they should have been able to, if the Saints offense last week is what we would have seen the first 2 weeks, that would have been a 30-plus point victory for them against the Philadelphia Eagles. So that was just one game that really jumped out to me, total of 42.5. I mean, you can even get a cheap money line price on this at minus 136 for Atlanta. I'm just not buying the Saints whatsoever. Falcons are one of the teams that that jumped off the board for me this week.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because, you can shop around a little bit, maybe get a half point here or there, but it does feel as if the Falcons, they're getting into shape, right?
Yep.
I mean, it feels like they are close to really breaking out offensively. And I think as long as they can continue to protect Kirk Cousins, there is a lot to like there. And it maybe feels as if, even though the start really remarkable for the Saints, an offensive explosion in the first couple of weeks that was almost unprecedented, but it's not gimmicky. It isn't gimmicky, but it might be hard to sustain. It's certainly hard to sustain at the level we saw in the first couple of weeks. And I think for the Falcons, a team that stands a chance to really get going and maybe even and be in the mix to win that division, it feels as if they were close. They could have, should have, maybe even beaten Kansas City. So they've hung with some really good teams. I'm with you. I really do. I like the Falcons here. What I really like is I like a lot of the props on Bijan Robinson, who did not entirely get on track against the Chiefs. Had he been able to do so, I think they probably end up winning that game. I suspect you'll see a better game from Bijan Robinson. There are a lot of player props in that regard. I'm not going to go with the crazy, he's going to get 100 yards rushing, but when you can get into a lot of those places that'll give you the combined 75 rushing and receiving, knowing how much he catches out of the backfield, I love plays like that. I like some of those player props. Robinson certainly comes to mind, and you can look at Cousins moving the ball around as well. So the Falcons intrigue me. And of course, with these two teams playing indoors all the time, I'm curious to see how that matchup works as well, because these guys are dome teams. And so you get to see them on the artificial surfaces, gets it a little bit faster. We shall see. But the next one, what's the next one you were looking at that you like?
Another interesting matchup, and this one might be a little bit more unpopular because I'll be picking a team that is 1-2 against a team that's undefeated. Give me the points at home with the Colts, man. I like the Colts plus 2.5 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is more so, I think that this could be the top of the market for Pittsburgh. I mean, they're winning. I love Mike Tomlin. I adore Mike Tomlin.
Oh, I do too.
I think he's the best head coach in the NFL.
Yep.
But I think they're skating by the thin of their teeth right now with Justin Fields. And I don't know if a Tomlin-led team should be favored going in on the road against the Colts. And I understand that a lot of people don't want to trust Anthony Richardson. It's definitely an interesting spot. But I don't know. I just feel like, here's the thing. It feels like a race to 20 for me. First team to score 20 points, much like the Broncos is going to win. I don't think the Steelers know how to win ugly, whereas the Colts have the explosiveness on their offense. That was just a line that jumped out to me that I was like, I don't mind the 2.5 with the Colts.
You know what? I'm going to go opposite of you on that. I'm going to fade that one because, one, I admit it. I don't trust Richardson just yet. But you know what I do trust, and who I do trust? TJ Watt. And the defense that can get after a quarterback and can do a lot of damage and can make things really difficult. So I think when you have a quarterback that's primarily still at this point in his career more dangerous as a runner than the passer, I like the team that can get after the quarterback. So that one, I'm going to go the opposite. I am okay with the Steelers in this one simply because I love their ability to get after the quarterback. But it is one of the interesting ones to take a look at. One of the other NFL games that you highlighted as well, Bills and Ravens. Talk about a show. This is maybe, actually, it's not even maybe. This is the best game in the NFL this week.
Yeah, without a doubt, man. Obviously, Sunday Night Football, 6:20 local time kickoff. And, I kind of like the Ravens in this matchup. I do. I just think maybe we're, again, a little bit at the top of the market for the Buffalo Bills. We've seen them.
And I think the Ravens with their start, people are undervaluing that.
They remember weeks 1 and 2, good win for them, sweaty win for them last week against the Cowboys, but Baltimore is a tough team to beat at home. I think they're starting to figure things out offensively and kind of get back into their groove. And maybe this doesn't apply to the Bills, but I also have a working theory that, a lot of these perceived good teams, I'm thinking Bengals, I'm thinking Ravens, I'm thinking Atlanta, as well. Some of these other teams that have gotten out to these slow starts, San Francisco, Dallas. These guys don't play in the preseason at all. The first 3 or 4 weeks of the regular season are essentially a ramp-up period before these teams finally hit their stride.
Right.
And not that I'm trying to completely discount what Baltimore has endured through the first 3 weeks. I just think they're better than what we've seen. I think Buffalo's been out to a blazing start. Don't get me wrong. Josh Allen's the front runner to win MVP right now, but on the road, tough place to play in Baltimore, getting under a field goal, the key number of 3 in the NFL. I'm laying the 2.5 of Baltimore.
This one is so hard for me to judge because, look, Buffalo, we talked about the early explosiveness by the Saints.
Right.
Buffalo now leads the NFL in points scored with 112. Josh Allen is playing at an elite level. This is the best he's ever played. Now, your point's correct. It's only 3 games in. I don't think we know. I also don't think that Baltimore's offense with with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson has really sorted itself out, to your point, with kind of the idea that you don't get a preseason. These first few games have been kind of ramp ups. What they did, I get they did have sweated out against Dallas, but what they did in the early going, I mean, yikes.
Yeah.
And it kind of shows what they're capable of. I like Baltimore's defense better than I like Buffalo's defense. I think that's part of the equation too. That said, I think I still have to take the Bills. They have been so impressive. And I've been a Bills doubter. I'm not even going to lie about it. I've been a Bills doubter, quite frankly, through all of Josh Allen's career. And I like Josh Allen, but so far doubting the Bills has been a pretty good business for the most part. But I think they're on to something. I think they're playing with confidence. I think they're playing with ability. I'm going to take the Bills in this one, but I fully understand I could be wrong. I just know I'm excited about that game. The one thing I know I'm taking, talking about player props though, is whatever rushing props you've got for Josh Allen, this is the one, because I don't think he's going to be able to dissect those guys and get a lot of passing yards.
Yep.
I think Allen's going to have to use his feet. I think he's going to have to do it to succeed. So maybe I even stay away from the game itself and just get into some of those. Maybe look at Lamar and Josh Allen's running game. Let's see if these guys go mano a mano, and let's see if we have it run it out. That will be a tremendous amount of fun. That game is going to be tremendous. We'll turn our attention back to the Buffaloes and UCF for a moment.
Yep.
This one feels a little bit weird. I think we agree that the Buffs, especially when you can get 14 at a plus 14 and a half, that feels like way too much for me. But what I am curious about that we didn't get a chance to talk about is the over under. It sits at 62.
Yeah, that's a big
now.
number.
The funny part is over at DraftKings, looking at it live right now, the favorite is actually to hit the over. I got to be honest, even though both of these teams are high scoring, I actually don't know, in what might be still a wet stadium, I don't think they're going to hit that.
Yeah,
I'm going to take the under on that.
I would lean towards the under as well for the reasons in which you just listed, on top of the fact that UCF is already a dominant running program, mixing the fact that the field might be a little wishy-washy. It just seems like there's a lot of factors that can push this game under. Now, I know it's college football, right? And one explosive play and you're in the end zone, whatever it might be. Buffs need to clean up their special teams because Baylor took a big. I mean, that's another way that you can limit points in this game.
200 plus return yards.
Yeah, so
that cannot happen again.
I would lean towards the under in this game as well. And we already talked about it. I like the Buffs with the points plus 14.
I love that, and I'll go as far to say I don't think they're the favorite. I won't pick them to win, but when on the money line, the Buffs are a plus 425 to take this one on the road. I don't hate throwing a half unit on it and throwing a little dart here when you're getting almost 4.5 to 1. Don't hate it.
I don't hate it at all.
Well, let's look at, of course, the game that everyone's thinking about. The Denver Broncos going for their second consecutive win in New York. They have invested the whole week staying out in West Virginia at the Greenbrier, enjoying the 5-star service there at that legendary facility, hoping that will all lead to a win against the Jets. Let's avoid the win and the loss. Let's get away from the predictions. Let's just go on the betting line. What do you see as some options in there?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. If I was going to bet just the straight spread, it'd be Broncos or bust for me, but I've actually been able to use the Jets in this game in a couple of different ways. For
Jets 8-point favorites on the live line right now.
And I was able to bet them last night. And here's what I did, guys. Shout out to the folks at Action Network. It's called the Wong Teaser, where you can get down through the key numbers of 7 and 3. So I've teased the Jets down to minus 1.5, and I've done the same with the where are they here? The Indianapolis Colts. So I'm getting over a touchdown with the Colts, and I'm getting again games with low totals here. We talked about it. That's kind of how the play looks at it. That's how I look at the play here. 39.5 is the total for Broncos Jets. So you expect the Jets to win the game, but can they win by margin? I'm going to take that margin out of it. Super low total in the Colts and Steelers game as well. So over a touchdown with the Colts and basically a pick 'em here with the Jets. Then I've also got another teaser with the Jets at minus 1.5. And I've gone ahead and teased up the Minnesota Vikings to plus 10. I think they're going to be able to keep that close. So to me, it would be Broncos or pass on the spread. I'm not touching that, but I do like the Jets as a teaser piece this week.
Interesting. Yeah. I got to say, I like when it's 8 points. I actually like the Broncos to cover this. Remember, both of their losses this year have been by 1 score. They've been in games. The defense is playing well. Alex Singleton's loss matters. It does. But I will tell you that in this game, when you're looking about the passing ability of Aaron Rodgers, I'm more concerned about Riley Moss's health. Pat Surtain's health and Brandon Jones and PJ Locke, who were a great tandem. So I like the Broncos and the points. And the other thing, I'll give you a little same game parlay over at DraftKings. Okay, 1, I think Bo Nix is finally going to get that first passing touchdown. I don't know how far it's going to be.
He
I
has
don't
to
know
if
who it's
they're going
going
to
to
win.
be, but I think he's going to get it. So you can have Bo Nix for 1+ touchdown, and you compare it with the other part that I think seems to be happening left and right, and happens a lot with rookies, by the way, like tuck and run. I like Bo Nix as an anytime touchdown scorer because we know that when they get into the red zone, he's calling his own number and doing it successfully. Now that would mean the Bo Nix would have to throw for one and run for one. I get that. That doesn't happen all the time. But I think with the Broncos offense being limited and they don't have that many weapons, Bo Nix might end up being the best weapon when you get into the red zone. You pair
Plus
those
330.
Together. Yeah, I got it over at DraftKings. You pair those together on the same game parlay. Plus 525 to throw one and run for one.
Let me say this too. We were talking about Tyler Bidet. He's 7-1 anytime touchdown score. If he is going to be running back one, probably getting those touches in the red zone.
Might not even need him in the red zone.
7-1 odds.
Audric Estime is not available. Still on the IR. 7-1 for an anytime touchdown for Bidet.
Little sprinkle, little pizza money to make the folks happy.
I thought you were making a Bidet joke with the sprinkle there, but then you went to pizza money. So I guess
I always think about food. That's what I think about.
That. So
food and gambling. I'm just a boy.
So let's look at the Broncos game itself. Obviously, this is a major opportunity for the Denver Broncos, but it is not going to be an easy game. They have to defensively be very good. One of the concerns here is he was great against Tampa Bay, but Nix did not receive a lot of pressure. Important to note that in the last game against Tampa Bay, and when the pressures hit, he was pressured 23.1% of the time. That's way different than the first two games. 36.7 against Seattle, 35.9 against Pittsburgh. I suspect the Jets will bring more heat than the Bucs did.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you have tape on a simplified, refined offensive game plan from the Broncos with Bo Nix.
You brought up Nix's first drive, right? Last game, 470 yards.
Yep.
The rest of the game, 21 for 31, 146.
Not great.
Went dink and dunk the rest of the way. So I think you're going to get more pressure. I think you're going to see the kind of games that were maybe closer to the first two defensively than what you saw against Tampa, who couldn't bring the same heat without Vita Vea.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I'm just interested here because I wonder if the Broncos were just able to take advantage of a depleted Bucs defense last week.
It felt like that a little bit to me. And that's why I think this game's fascinating, because I want to see how much of that was for real.
Right.
I don't think we know.
And I think we're about to find out, which is the fun part as well. I would not be surprised if the Broncos were able to keep this within one possession. Like, do I think they're going to win? No. Like I said, I've paired the Jets in two teasers because of that belief. But at the end of the day, man, I think that the Broncos hopefully figured out at least how to be a little bit more competent on the offensive side of the ball, because that Steelers matchup was disgusting. But as it pertains to this game, like I said, it's Broncos with the points or pass straight up on the line.
Yeah, good performance by Alex Palczewski, filling in for Mike McGlinchey at right tackle. He'll do it again in this game, but watch him again. He held up versus the Bucs. He'll have to do it again versus the Jets. I'm with you. I cannot pick the Broncos to win this game. I think they're going to keep it within one score, though. And if they did, I think we'll be talking about a Bronco team that continually, as we talked about realistically on this show, all off-season long, all preseason and training camp long, and thus far all season long, the Broncos measurement should not be playoffs or even wins. It should be week to week improvement. And the Broncos could lose this game by one possession and still say we're seeing improvement. That's what I want to see in this game. I hope that's what we will see. Some great football this weekend. Of course, college football, you have the Buffs and UCF. They will get that going. Again, can't miss them. 5 games, 5 on national TV. Fox at 1:30. Make sure you're at number 38 in Rhino. Say hi to Anilo and Danny as well. Scotia is going to be doing pre and post game. It's going to be a show. So get down there and watch the Buffs and UCF Broncos Jets. Of course, we'll get another morning game. So wake up, everybody. One of those Sunday morning ones. Broncos and Jets will get going, as Bo Nix said. Surreal to get to play against Aaron Rodgers. We'll see what the Broncos do. We'll be back at it on Monday, of course, to break it all down. Thanks for Dan Mohrmann for joining us, talking about all of the Preps action. Go download the Colorado Preps app, powered by Ford, to get all the latest, including the near real-time scoreboard for everything across the state. Thanks to Troy Renck, who did his best to join us, but the rains from the remainder of the hurricane making things a little bit tricky. We will have him on Monday to break down the game as well. Danny Bailey is the man in the booth that makes every single thing work. All we have is knobs, and I don't know what they do. It's all Danny. Make sure you tell him thank you when you're down watching the game tomorrow at number 38 as well. That will do it for us. Enjoy the end of the Rocky season. Congratulations to a terrific career by Charlie Blackmon. If you're going down, enjoy the game. The Rockies trying to avoid losing 100 games for the second year in a row.
We'll see.
But that probably matters less if you're going down to Coors Field. Go celebrate number 19 one more time. Have a safe and wonderful weekend. We will catch you back here on Monday. Thanks so much to Anilo Piro for joining us. Always a treat to get to break it down with him, especially with a big bus game this weekend. I'm Sean Drotar. This is Mile High Sports.
Leading off and playing center field from the Colorado Rockies, Charlie Blackman.
He's 20, baby! Yeah, he's